Okay, good afternoon or morning or evening, whenever you listen to this. One more, what is it? One week closer to enlightenment. I remember at the hotel I used to work at, people would greet each other, and then the joke, when I saw them, some of the cooks didn't seem to be in a good mood, and so I tried to cheer them up, and I'd go, one day closer to retirement. But for us, it's one day closer to enlightenment. So let's start with our 3 prostrations. And to think about that lineage since Gautama Buddha, 2,500 years ago. Over 40 teachers have made up that lineage. So to thank them for passing on the information, the teachings, body, speech, and mind. Body, speech, and mind. Body, speech, and mind. And then to do our opening prayers. First one again, remembering all beings, how if you do believe in past lives, future lives, that every single one of them has been your beloved, your dearest, your favorite parent, friend, family member, lover. So we are going to help them all by offering the mandala. So let's do that in Tibetan. Sashi Puki Jukshin Meitong Tram Viram Lingshi Yende Genpa Di Sangye Shindu Mite Uwargi Drokun Namdak Shingla Drupar Shog Idam Guru Ratnam Malakam Niratayami. And then this refuge, taking refuge, we'll do the first one in Tibetan, second one in English, third time in Tibetan again. So, Sangye Chudang Soki Choknam La Jangshu Pardu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Dakni Jinyin Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Jupar Shok. I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the power of the goodness that I do in giving and the rest, may I reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. And third time, Sangye Chudang Soki Choknam La Jangshu Pardu Dakni Yapsu Chi Dakni Jinyin Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupar Shok. Okay. So why don't we start class with a little meditation. Not a very long one, but just so that you can say you did a meditation. I always look forward to the days I have meditation class, because then I don't do my meditation, and it means sometimes at nighttime it's always feels like a little treat to be guided All right. Now, I've guided you into meditation before, but when you're on your own, probably one of the big obstacles is that your mind is really busy. You got things that you're thinking about, planning, it's on your mind. And so it's nice if you often, before I meditate at night, I'll kind of just for me, it's more about planning things that seems to be on my mind. So I usually will kind of plan or write down in my calendar what I might come up in my meditation. And for others, it will be maybe what's happened during the day. And so I have, not as common, but I'll write down also in my journal kind of what happened that day. Reflect on that so that it's, just not right in my face as you're trying to concentrate on something else. So I'd say do that. And one thing that they don't say in Buddhism, but that definitely helps in yoga, is breathing. Our breathing is what is, they say, the bridge between our outer world and our inner world. And your breath, when you feel stressed, it will be shallow and short. And when you're relaxed, at peace, you'll notice probably breathe like a baby, long, smooth breaths. Belly rises because you're breathing right into the bottom of your lungs. So when you're stressed, it affects your breathing. But in reverse, if you affect your breathing, change your breathing, it affects how you feel, right? So that is really important. And this is one breathing exercise that I use quite regularly on those nights when I have had a meditation class and I'm not going to meditate before I go to bed. I do this breathing exercise, and it's called Nadi Shodhana. With your right hand, fold your first two fingers down, thumb closing off one, ring finger the other. And very simply, just start by exhaling through your left nostril. Inhaling through your left nostril. Closing your left, exhaling through your right nostril. Inhaling through your right nostril when you're finished. Closing the right, exhaling through your left. Inhaling through your left. And continuing exhaling through the right. Inhaling back through the right. Closing the right, exhaling through your left. So you just did 2 rounds where you begin and end on your left nostril. Continue at your own pace. If your nose is still clogged so far after 2 rounds, use a Kleenex. If you don't think it will clear, just visualize the breath going through one nostril at a time. Otherwise, just check. It's natural that your head drops down. So just keep it so that if you're in meditation pose, if you look through the middle of your eyes, you look out towards imaginary horizon. And it tends to be your head will turn a little to the right because you're using your right arm. So keep it centered. And if your right arm gets tired, use your left hand to support your right elbow like this. But do your best without forcing it to make your breath smooth and long. Think of water going through a hose, a slow, steady stream. And see if you can count 10 more rounds. Again, 1 round beginning, ending from your left. 3 more rounds. You finish just coming into your sitting position, nice tall spine, ankles, knees, hips comfortable. Tip of your tongue resting where the roof of your mouth meets the top of your teeth. Facial muscles and forehead between your eyebrows relaxed. And just notice your breath. Just follow your inhale and your exhale. You not remember whether it's a little different than before you did this Nadi Shodhana, alternate nostril breath. But if you feel different, your mind calmer, emotions, whatever it was, coming into class a little less intense, you're feeling the effects of this, of your breath affecting your nervous system. You probably did about 15 to 20 rounds in total. I recommend, doing 20 before bed if you have a busy mind, for something stressful. You need to focus, really upset. You can do this anytime, after you eat, before you eat. And what I like about it, instead of just saying take 3 breaths, is it does require you to focus, move your fingers, and actually can give your mind a little relief from what's on its mind, what's bothering you. Have you just focus on your breath for another 2 more minutes. Keep following the length of your inhale or your exhale. That little pause at the end of your inhale or exhale. Just coming back whenever your mind wanders away. Drawing 3 more breaths. So you do, no rush, just to tuck your chin in, round your back. Move however your body might need you to, want you to. Like rubbing my palms and then placing the warmth, the energy, heat over my eyes. This part, the sense that we use so much, that they say we mistake. Some will mistake our eyes as our mind, you know, because it's such our strongest sense. Okay, so you can consider yourself having practiced your meditation, even though it was just short. And if you can remember what we learned last week, covered, I mean, the basic message is that Kedrup J was by breaking down everything we know in the universe, from knowable things to unchanging things, changing things, was just slowly saying mind cannot come from, certain things because of a certain reason. And by eliminating everything, it was left that the mind must come from a previous moment of mind. And if that is the case, that proves that before you were born, your mind came from a previous moment of mind, that you did have a previous life. And, going forward, when you die, where does the mind go? It supposedly will go into another future moment of mind, right? So today we're kind of covering Dharmakirti's commentary on that, which you'll hear is kind of similar reasons. He kind of breaks it down into different proofs. Again, he's kind of like the father of logic. Dignaga is like a grandfather, and Kedrup J would be like the son of logic. So that is what. So the proofs are not really long. But it was actually before the previous class that I thought of something I wanted to kind of share. And there's this message I heard before, pretty much the basis is that, even if you did not believe in karma, after all these classes you listen to, may not fully believe in emptiness, that things that we see and experience are not really out there on its own. They're actually coming from our mind, from past projections. Not so many people believe in that, right? So consider, that maybe that's not true. Even consider maybe there's no past lives, no future lives. A lot of people believe we're just born, and when we die, that's the end of us. Nothing about us will exist. This awareness, consciousness that we have is part of the body, and so when the body dies, then that part of us dies too. So yeah, consider if those, distinguishing features of Buddhism, I'd say, are not true. Is there any value in the teachings, So that's kind of what I remember hearing and how I heard the message was, yes, there is. So I thought I'd share that just in case, you know. And I thought I'd kind of use this as an opportunity to review the 3 previous courses. The first one, some of you may or may not have heard about, was the 3 principal paths. The 3 paths that Buddha says we must follow if we're wanting to reach enlightenment, you know. So yeah, consider we don't know whether enlightenment really exists, you know. We've never experienced it. We don't know someone who has and returned from it and told us about it, other than the Buddha, but nobody in probably your living circle of friends and family, right? So if that's the case, what about those 3 paths? Well, the first one, you may recall, is renunciation. And what does that mean? Does it mean giving up everything? What I told you I was afraid of, you know, giving up my family, giving everything to the temple? No. I mean, renunciation at its core is just realizing that things in this world are not the reason we feel good or bad, right? Kind of seeing the result of what we feel is separate from that thing. But, I mean, by not having attachment to things, wouldn't you agree? I was writing down, thinking about that if we're not so attached, you know, for many people, they are attached to their vehicles, clothing, their home, collectibles. My wife loves her bags, even though she never takes them out. They're like in a bag in the closet, hidden away. Would we not maybe buy less? You know, maybe because we buy less, we would waste less. You know, like you've heard of 1-800 get rid of junk. You know how many, you know, this growing business relies and probably only exists here in the first world because we have so much stuff that we don't use, that, you know, fills up every crook and cranny of our home, our garage. So maybe when we don't think this will make us happy, we'll buy less, you know, have less to waste, to recycle, reuse, leading to simpler lives. You know, some of you have heard of the simple movement where, you know, when you need less, you spend less, and then you need to work less, or you can retire earlier. And what does that do? Well, we're facing climate change. You know, the earth is under stress from us taking all of its resources and not allowing it to replenish, right? There's this great birthday card I remember receiving, and it was, I think, a monk. The picture of the card is the monk just holding a box, and then opens up the box, looks inside, and then you see the bubble from his mouth. It's like, oh, great, you got me nothing. Yeah, that card was one I remember, because, yeah, we don't need things less than we may think we do. You know, if you ever go off into a meditation retreat, camping, even vacation, you realize you don't need a lot of what you think you need, right? So second path, bodhicitta, you know, wanting to reach enlightenment for the sake of other beings. Translated to, if you're not going to reach enlightenment, just thinking of others. For some of us, this is something we naturally do. We think it's normal. Thinking about our family, probably foremost. From those closest to you, parents, siblings, to, relatives. But yeah, I think probably some of you think of them like extensions of yourself. They're part of you and you will do whatever you need to do. I've heard of wonderful, many stories of how people give financial help, obviously emotional help, physical help, give them support, food, shelter. So, Buddhism will say, what about those who are not supposedly blood? What about your neighbor, your coworker? I mean, I often refer to those at Open Door Yoga as part of my family, my work family. And for many of people, they see their work family more than they see their own family. Probably more than their relatives. I remember one time I asked for 2 big meetings a year, and one teacher who was going away was like, I see you guys more than I see my own family, which is true. But if we treated them like our family, which some people do, wouldn't the world be a little different? Wouldn't it be nice to know that, if something went wrong, and some people experience this, your neighbors can help those who need it. We definitely had that. And kids were young, our neighbors could be counted on to watch them when we were out. But I'm sure you've borrowed things from your neighbor or lent things to your neighbor. If some of you have had a death in the family, you've probably been the recipient of food from others, and you've probably given food to others. Wouldn't the world be different if we didn't have to maybe hoard, collect so much? Let's say money, which is just maybe a substitute for being able to, some energy that allows us to have food and shelter and things. Maybe we wouldn't need so much to be so focused on getting more and more of that if we knew, our neighbors, our family would help us if there's emergencies happen. For sure we don't want to rely on them, but if, we would do the same for others, and, people saw the definition of family as not just, as I said, people with the same bloodline. Just imagine how it would be like. Wouldn't people live simpler lives? Same thing as what I just mentioned about renunciation. Wisdom, according to Buddhism, is, learning about how things work. And that's supposedly emptiness, that things don't exist out there. So again, I was considering telling you to, okay, maybe you haven't seen the direct perception of emptiness, neither have I, so we can't say that is how it is. So I have met a teacher who has seen it, and the way he lives definitely reflects him seeing that things don't exist from out there. But, if we translate that to what would it mean for us? It would mean, continuing to learn, I think. Take time to having time to understand kind of how society functions, what works. Instead of just thinking about ourselves, we can think about our neighborhood, our city that we live in, the country that we live in, the planet that we live in. A lot of people do that and are standing up for things from small, to something big, helping climate change. A lot of people are trying to get the rest of us to do that. But it is seeing, how focusing on ourselves and what we want, what we don't want, is not always the happiest thing. That those of you who've helped others will realize and probably can attest, there's a joy, there's a relief of thinking about me, and that helping others is so fulfilling and feels so good. So, these days, I think many people are, they said the newest Generation Z, I think I call it, are upset that AI is possibly going to be taking away a lot of jobs, this is one idea I've heard of, that they said if the countries, did not have a defense budget, did not spend at least 10% of their money on military equipment and artillery, there would be enough for everyone to have like a basic living wage, that they were trying to vote for in Switzerland, that I think almost got voted for. That would provide everyone with shelter, basic shelter, food, education. It would still require that they may need to work to get other comforts, but at least those basics would be taken care of. And then, that way they could do not just what's practical, but do what they love, do what they have discovered their gift to be. Because for some, sharing their gift, it may be something that doesn't compensate them, something that they can't do because they got to take care of themselves and their family, loved ones. So those are some thoughts on how following these three paths, whether you believe in some things that you can't experience directly, see directly. The second one was, of course, was refuge. And refuge, I would say, is, to remind you, means seeking protection in something outside of yourself, right? You're going to refuge, if it's raining as it is this weekend, you want to go somewhere where it's dry, right? Simple example. So the refuge in Buddha, it would just simply be, the same way many agree he was an enlightened being, many people take refuge in Jesus or Muhammad, What are they really taking refuge in is really the Dharma. It's their teachings, what they've written down, what they've said. And so, again, there's a lot of sutras written by, said by Buddha, commentaries on that by people in the lineage. Christians, they rely on the Bible, Muslims on the Quran. So that is protection. The Sangha, taking refuge in the Sangha, is seeking protection those who officially have seen the direct perception of emptiness, though it's also used to describe just people in that community. And you could say the people in a Buddhist community, in a meditation group, in a temple, and it could be, as few as you and your Buddhist teacher, right? So, and maybe to describe quickly, I won't go into the details, just so that this class isn't so long. But what are the many advices of Buddha? I'll kind of repeat some that you've already heard. One is just to live morally. It's in Christianity is the 10 Commandments. In Buddhism, it's avoiding the 10 misdeeds of killing others, stealing from others, having sexual misconduct, lying, dividing people, being harsh, saying harsh words, talking about unimportant things, coveting other people's things, wishing people ill will, not believing in karma, emptiness, past and future lives. So yeah, living morally, I think, makes sense. A lot of you may do many of those things already, like opposite of the misdeeds. You may do the good deeds, protecting life, protecting people's belongings. I can say the example is my wife's always worried, I lock things up and put things away. In a way, it's a good thing. Like, she's making it harder for someone to take my things, right? Protecting relationships, other people's marriages, telling the truth, bringing people together, saying kind things to people, talking about important things instead of gossiping about others, they're saying. Celebrating when people around you are getting great and amazing things, instead of being jealous, and wishing people well, even if they've done you harm, having compassion for them, understanding maybe they're doing this because they're upset, stressed, uncomfortable. So yeah, there is another level, Bodhisattva vows. I'm not going to go into today, but it's actually a course which includes the 6 perfections. There is the famous Buddhist quote that was in this series about Buddha asking us not to judge others, because we don't know whether they actually might be enlightened being in disguise. But even if you don't believe that, wouldn't it be nice for us to hold back our judgments, not be so quick to judge, give people a benefit of the doubt, step in their shoes, so not judging others, not reacting to others is one thing he's saying. When people do things that we don't like, and copying, doing to others what you like. If you like people being generous to you and kind to you and thoughtful to you and listening to you, you do the same. Respecting your parents, that's definitely one of the messages from the Buddha. Your mother, your father, teachers. So why am I saying this? Because the Buddhist teachings, you have to agree, if you do follow these things, it will make you a great family member, make you a great friend, make you a great member of the public, human race, someone others love being around, enjoy being in the company of. And most of all, someone you can look in the mirror and be very proud and proud of being, and feeling your conscience clear. So maybe the previous course was the third one about meditation. What is Buddha's message? To do it daily. Why? It's supposed to increase our focus so that we can be able to have the focus to see, to be able to keep our mind on one object, so that when we do have the virtue to have the direct perception of emptiness, we can keep our mind there, not have it to, past or future, right? But again, if you don't fully believe there's this direct perception of emptiness, isn't it good just to meditate daily? Buddha's famous quote is that meditation has not helped him gain anything, but it gets rid of anger, anxiety, depression, insecurity, and fear of old age and death. Yeah. And that I can maybe, ask ChatGPT what are the benefits of meditating, and it gives a kind of a whole collection. You can check it for yourself, but there's things that it increases, things that it decreases. It will say mentally increases, I think you agree, or focus or mental clarity. Physically, they say it can decrease your blood pressure and boost your immune system, help with your sleep. Emotionally, it increases our ability to cope with stress, be more patient. Spiritually, think of being more compassionate. Right? So all these benefits, without the main one, with what Buddhism is saying, the seeing the direct perception of emptiness, they all come with no side effects, right? I don't know, maybe you could say less free time, but it's not like if you do too much, you're going to, have a toxic liver, right? Best of all, though it takes time, some will say time is money, you can say it's free. It's available to you. You can do it anytime, in the morning, afternoon, evening, it's easier in a quiet place, in the same spot, but you can do it out in public. You can do it in transit, while I've done it in the airplane, so yeah, that is how I can see, things that that you might not have experienced, that others may argue, or that there's some doubt in your mind. Just consider there are real benefits that maybe we'll all agree on to what Buddhism, Buddha has taught. So going into today's class, just check on time. Dharmakirti is providing some proofs. Today we go over 6 kind of rather quickly on how the mind must come from something similar. And so, when when he wrote this in 600 AD, he was arguing with another group from Hindu, the Sharvakas, that no longer exist, who believe that the mind was connected to the body, was part of the body. When the body dies, our awareness, consciousness is gone, you know. So he's arguing with them, and what he uses as his comparison is that when a child is born, and when a child is born, you know, he was telling the other group, it has its 5 senses, it is breathing, you know, has a functioning mind, which is already suffering because they're already crying, you know, feeling anxiety. So these are the 3 things when in some of these proofs it says take the 3. Okay, 5, their sense powers, their breathing, that they have a functioning mind at birth. Because remember, at this time, 640 AD, they had no ability to see what the baby was like or thinking or feeling inside the mother's womb, right? They could basically only with their senses observe these 3 things once the baby was conceived, was born, came out. So the first proof is take these 3. They did not come from something not similar. They must come from something similar. So just note that second line, they did not come from something not similar, is a double negative. So that's why the third part of this proof is just, it can't be from something, you know, which is not similar to mind, clear and aware, being able to move, you know, having no shape, you know, that you can't feel the mind, you can't break the mind, can't squeeze the mind, you can't tell where it is. Your mind can go from China to the South Pole to Iceland, back like as quick as I just mentioned those places, you know. So yeah, that, you know, the first 2 things, the sense powers, the breathing, he's saying it comes from physical parts of the child, but the mind then must come from mind. Second proof of that mind comes from mind is that take these 3. They do not come from the 4 elements alone. They come from something similar, something earlier of a similar type. Now these 4 elements alone, you have to again remember in 640 AD there was no electron microscope. They probably couldn't see cells. They didn't know the smallest particle. They didn't know about atoms. They didn't know what made up atoms, quarks. So what they described to be what everything was made of was these 4 elements. And they don't mean elements from the chemical table. They mean earth, water, fire, and air. And they don't actually mean like these actual physical things make up everything, like, you know, make up this shirt. They're saying that the energy associated with these, with earth, energy associated with water, with fire, air, combinations of these 4 create, you know, so that something with a lot more earth energy creates a hardness, you know. The water energy creates the wetness, the fluidity in something. Probably more wetness, because air is more the mobility and movement. Fire is more the heat in things, all right? So, example, a wall has more earth energy than a carpet. Right? So here, you know, he's telling the Sharvakas, you know, again, the sense powers and the breathing might come from something of a similar type, but the mind cannot be something from these four elements. Cannot turn into the mind. Right? Okay. So the third proof is take the three, again the three things, sense powers, breathing, and the mind, did not come from the elements alone because the elements are not a living being. So, okay. And then the fourth proof is take the mind. Now he's talking about the mind directly. It is not something which does not cross into the next life because of the mind's ability to continue itself. So again, there's a double negative. It is not something which does not cross into the next life because of the mind's ability to continue itself. That from this moment, your mind exists, and in the next moment, which you could say a second or minute, an hour, it continues itself. So our mind has shown its ability to continue itself. Why would it suddenly stop when the body, which is different from the mind, stops? And it's saying then, before birth, that the mind has continued. Why wouldn't the mind have continued even before the body, living tissue, came into being? So proof number 5 is take the elements, the 4 elements. They're not the cause of the 3, because there should never be cases where the elements fail to cause the 3. So this is that if the mind was made up of a combination of fire, earth, water, air, that every time there was a combination, a mind would be created. Every time there is and then the 6th proof is that take the elements, they're not the cause of the 3, because multiple elements would lead to multiple people. So that the elements, if they were the cause of the mind, again, if, the earth, fire, air, and water were the cause of the mind, that you would having multiple elements would result in multiple people. Just say, for example, if we say an element like sulfur, if sulfur was required, something chemical was going to create our mind, having sulfur would always create a mind. 20 teaspoons of sulfur would lead to 20 minds, which is not true. So these are 6 of his arguments. We're covering it a few more next class. And, if they sound quite similar, as I said, to what Kedrips J talked about last class, it is true. Supposedly Dharmakirti shared these ones first, argued with the Shravakas, and that's why they no longer exist, because, but Khedrubje, in his commentary to Master Dignaga's Dharmakirti's work here, explained it by eliminating what it isn't. So I guess you could say today's class is a little bit like a variation, and we will cover, I think there is 4 more proofs next class, plus some other good info. So will end class now, as I had a little stressful thing at the studio, which I'm so glad I meditated and it didn't cause me to react, and instead I could think clearly and come up with a solution. But let's end with closing prayers to dedicate the virtue from what we have just done. So let's do it once in Tibetan, once in English. Kewa ji kewo kun sunam yeshe zok zok sheng sunam yeshe lejong wei dampa kunyin topar shok. By the goodness of what I've just done in giving and the rest, may all beings complete the collection of merit and wisdom, and thus gain the 2 ultimate bodies that merit and wisdom make. Okay. And end with the 3 prostrations, giving thanks for the teachings again. Body, speech, mind. Thank you for listening, watching, and we'll see you next week. Namaste.